Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Several years ago, we did a segment where we were recognizing the idea that today's world seems to have changed on us when it comes to parenting. Many of our children are having children now and passing that responsibility on to their own parents, so we're grandparents basically raising our grandchildren. Then we come into that dilemma where we believe that there is this large generational gap where we just don't seem to be able to understand these children in this day and age. Just not too long ago, in fact, we had another segment where we talked about the different generations, such as the baby boomers, the X generation, the Y generation, and the ideal of entitlement. So what do you do when you're raising a child under your home that just doesn't seem to want to cooperate, that just doesn't seem to also want to respect your boundaries or give any kind of respect of any kind whatsoever? Sure, you can take things away, put them in the corner, spank them, and a whole list of things, but in this day and age, especially with the entitlement generation, as we have heard them called, they tend to just shut down. Call it passive resistance, if you will. What do you do so these children are prepared as you raise them to be out there in the world and to be self-responsible? Well, joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a special guest who has created simply what is known as Love and Logic, and is so well respected around the world that people are just demanding for him to come and speak to teach them how to do something that we used to think was just basic nature, and that's parenting our own children. I'd like to welcome to our program today our guest, Jim Fay, as we talk about how we can parent our children through what is simply known as Love and Logic. And Jim Fay, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be with you. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you. Your voice sounds very familiar as even my own wife, as she brought in her teenage children, was pulling her hair out saying, God, what do I do? And it was about that time that Love and Logic dumped into her lap, and I said, well, honey, that was always there the whole time. Talk about what the power of Love and Logic truly is.
The power of Love and Logic, the real secret, and we're going to get into this before the show is over, is that Love and Logic parents actually wake up every morning hoping that their kids will make a whole lot of little mistakes. You know, those kind of mistakes that are not life-threatening and threatening to the limb. And they kind of pray also that they have the courage to hold their kids accountable in a special way so that the kids don't see the adults as being mean or the source of their problem. So we're going to get into that today. Also, this whole idea about setting boundaries that you said, we can make that really, really simple.
Well, you know, and that's just it, especially, you know, you hear, well, you know, I had children and they were beautiful babies, then they became teenagers, and you think, oh, what am I supposed to do here? But it gets to a day and age where I've even began to notice, even in some young adults, is nobody really wants to be accountable for anything anymore. And it's like, you know, where did all that start?
Well, we did that to the kids, a lot of us. You know, when I was growing up, my dad used to say, sit down and shut up, and I sat down and shut up. But I didn't like it. So I went out in the neighborhood, and I told all my friends that he was mean, and he was bossy and that kind of stuff. And you know what they told me?
No.
They said, well, that's because he loves you, and that's what daddies are supposed to do. And that was the cultural norm at that time. Well, I had kids of my own, and I decided I wasn't going to be mean to them. I'm not going to yell at them and tell them to sit down and shut up. But I found myself doing exactly the same thing. And lo and behold, my kids didn't sit down and shut up. They looked at me and said, we're calling social services. We have
right. You know? I heard that even from my own daughter about child abuse. What?
The world had changed. In fact, see, I've been working with kids now for 56 years, and I've seen some monumental changes. But, you know, one of the changes that we've seen is worldwide, a lot of change just in cultural norms. You know, our website gets about 4 million hits every month, people looking for help. And a lot of those actually come from places like Singapore, where they used to be able to use the autocratic model. And they said, you know, up until the time the kids got the web, the autocratic model worked really good. But now the kids can talk to other kids all over the world who say, hey, you have rights, our parents do that, we do this, it works. And they're ganging up on us now. So they're saying, gee, we need a different approach. But we've got a powerful one that it's all designed to meet basic human needs. And, basic human needs haven't changed, even though culture has. So people have a strong need for limits and boundaries. They still have a strong need for love and affection and healthy control. And love and logic is all about meeting those in a healthy way.
Now, Jim, it's interesting because you tend to have children, and we can go back as early as, say, 5 years old, maybe in some cases younger, and moving it forward into their teens. And what they want is, look, you just pay for everything that I need, and let me just live in the world the way that I want to, as though they think they're ready for the world as it is. And it's such an interesting illusion when they try to take a stance of independence like that. Let's talk about what love and logic is exactly and how it actually works when it comes to parenting.
Let's start out with the basics. If somebody came to a love and logic parenting course, the first thing we would teach them is that it wouldn't matter what limits you set in your house. Your kids are going to test those limits. They're going to say, it's not fair. You don't love me. All the other kids get to do it. And what they're actually doing is testing you to see if you love them enough to set some boundaries for them. And a lot of times we betray our kids by not doing it. So before we do anything, we need to teach parents how to handle that, how to neutralize that arguing and that testing. And maybe just a simple little phrase will get it done. So when the kids say, well, it's not fair. I know. Love you too much to argue. Well, this is stupid. Yeah, I love you too much to argue. Well, all my friends have to love you too much. You don't love me? Love you too much to argue. And see, that drives them crazy, which is a whole lot better than them driving us crazy. But it also says to them, when we set a limit, we're not going to raise our voice. We're not going to be mean. We're not going to yell. But that's it. In fact, one of our very favorite things to say to kids, and probably most effective, is when they're testing those limits, is to just calmly say, so what did I say? So what did I say? Unfortunately, the kids aren't going to look at you and say, oh, thanks for upgrading your parenting skills. Now I'm going to be a much better adult when I grow up. They're going to get up and happy. And when they get unhappy about that, that means we're actually doing the right thing. Because doing the right thing usually feels uncomfortable because it isn't the same as what our parents did.
And it's interesting that you put it that way because this day and age, I remember back in the day, if you mouthed off to your mother or your father, you might get a rap right upside the head.
Yeah.
You do that today, and these kids will actually come after you.
Well, metaphorically, love you too much to argue, or what did I say, is a rap upside the head. In a real gentle way. And it's much more powerful because the kid can't look at you thinking you're being mean, It says, hey, I'll tell you how I'm going to run my life, and you figure out how to fit into it. My car will be leaving at 7:30. The first rule of love and logic is we need to set firm limits with kids, and the way we do that is we tell them what we're going to do, not what they're going to do.
Right.
My car will be leaving at 7:30. I'll be serving dinner for the next 20 minutes. I give out allowance at 6 o'clock on Saturday. So they can argue with it, but they're not going to get anywhere because we're going to say, so what did I say? And the second rule of love and logic is when kids cause a problem, you hand it back to them. You don't take it on yourself. I did an interview yesterday, and the woman was telling me that, gee, I set a limit. I send my kids into their room at night and say, you got to stay there. And they tear the room up. And then she said, and I have to put it back together, and I have to repair the stuff. No way. We hand that back to the kid in a loving way. And we say, wow, how are you going to get that cleaned up? That's a real bummer. So we wrap all our consequences in sincere empathy. It's a little harder for them to see us as being mean. So if a kid wrecks the family car and I jump all over him and say, I've told you, why don't you ever listen? What does it matter? Can't you just think for once in your life? You know what's going to happen. The kid is going to go into defensive mode, fight back, see me as the bad guy. But what if I had the very same consequence? Well, here we're probably going to say, and you're going to pay for that car, right? So what if you had the same consequence, but you wrapped it, first of all, in empathy? Oh, that's got to feel awful. I bet you feel really bad. And you'll be driving again as soon as you get that car paid for. A little hard for that kid to see me as the bad guy right now.
Right.
And more inclined to say to himself, oh, my golly, what did I do? And the whole thing we're talking about here in this program is going to be, how can you raise kids who start to develop a little voice in their head that says, I wonder how my next decision is going to affect me? Because if you do that, you're not going to raise an entitled kid. You're not going to raise a kid who's easily swayed by peer pressure. You're not going to raise a kid who's quick to get into drugs and alcohol and that kind of thing. If very early in life he's made a lot of those little mistakes and we've held him accountable, but in a loving way.
Now, it's interesting because we're also at a time where, because of the breakup of marriages, averages as 1 and 2, is that we're also dealing in step child and parent relationships.
Right.
And an example of that is there's a friend of mine who has found someone she really wants to be with who has a 13-year-old daughter. Now, this was a story she shared with me, and I actually gave her, Love and Logic, handed a book, a CD. I said, just take a look at this, And anyway, so they're not married. They really don't live together as far as I know. But, I mean, this 13-year-old, the father's just basically giving her everything she wants.
Yeah.
And they were at a movie not too long ago she was describing. And the 13-year-old just simply says in the theater, she says, I need to get my hair cut for school. Shut up. End of the discussion. As though they were going to pick up and just leave that theater right then and there. And that's exactly what she wanted. And my friend just simply said, she said, I had to get up and walk out. And I said, well, let me ask you this question. Is he willing to support you if he's willing to, kind of let you step in? And she says, no, not really. And she's like beating him over the head with this book, Love and Logic. Say, hey, look.
Yeah.
But, there's those kinds of situations, and they seem extreme. But talk about how you would probably deal with something like that.
Well, first of all, in any kind of a situation like that, if it's ever going to work, the birth parent has to be the heavy for discipline.
Right.
And the step parent or friend is just got to be the backup. Mm-hmm. So, but I would probably, if that happened, I would probably just say, oh, sweetie, you're right, let's leave the movie. And I'd get in the car and I'd drive home. And let her carry on but I need my hair cut. Oh, I'm sure you did. And help me understand why I would want to help somebody who talks like you do. So when you figure that out, come and talk to me. Mm-hmm. We hand that problem right back to her. Let her cause her own problem, and then let her stew in it. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to yell about it. Mm-hmm. But then we don't have to say, don't you talk to me like that. Let's suppose that had happened in the theater. Don't you talk to me like that. You see what happens is Love and Logic is big on empathy, because what we've discovered over the years is that you can actually change a person's brain chemistry. You actually have the power to decide whether somebody's going to be in fighting mode, defensive mode, which is brainstem operation, or they're in thinking mode, which is frontal cortex operation. If you jump on that kid and say, don't you dare talk to me like that, well, we know what's going to happen. Right. The brain is immediately going to go into fighting mode, defensive mode. It's just built that way. But if you were to say to somebody, oh, wow, the brain has got to go into thinking mode, doesn't it?
Sure.
So if in the restaurant, if we had the presence of mind to just say, oh, wow, I guess you're right, we need to leave this movie, and just walk out. There's going to be a lot of thinking going on. But, if you have a parent who's so bent on making sure that the kids know how bad the ex is and how good you are, you're probably sabotaging yourself, and maybe you deserve everything you get. That's kind of harsh words, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But for the friend of the girl's mother, my advice is step back and don't get too involved in that family until Mom has had a parenting course and has decided that she's going to actually set some limits for the kid, or wait till that girl is out of the home and then get married.
Yeah.
But not now. Recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It certainly sounds like that, especially in a step relationship where, as you said, the birthing parent just is very passive about how everything is. Jellyfish, if you will, I guess is a term that was coined here. Now, let's talk about parents who are separated. They may have kids who are, 9 to, say, 16 years old, give or take. It really doesn't matter the age. But you have one side that's just basically saying, yeah, go ahead and do whatever you want. Yet the other one's trying to set boundaries, so the kids are back and forth between the home. How does that work?
Well, it can work as long as the healthiest of the two parents is willing to say, the kid's going to have two different kind of parents. And someday, this kid is going to develop a special relationship with each one of those parents. And eventually, that kid will gravitate toward the class act, the person who has set the boundaries for them. I'll never forget working with a 14-year-old girl who screamed that she hated her dad. Now, this is a kid who smoked marijuana with her dad, and he let her do anything she wanted. He gave her anything, let her stay out, totally permissive. And she says, I hate my dad, and she's just to the verge of screaming at the top of her lungs. And I said, why? And she thought, and she said, he lets me do everything I want to do. In other words, he has robbed me of one of the most basic of all human needs, which is the need for boundaries and limits. See, that years ago, Maslow, in 1954, that great psychologist, came up with the hierarchy of basic human needs that don't change in culture, doesn't change in skin color or whatever. And those needs were, first of all, physical and emotional safety. Well, it took years and years before other psychologists figured out what he was talking about was limits and boundaries. And when people don't have limits and boundaries, they flounder. They tend to hate the people who don't provide those for them. Now, they'll still fight the people who do provide them, but that's only to make sure that the limits are there. And that's what this little girl was telling the world that day. But I need these limits and boundaries, and I'm floundering, and I have to keep acting worse and worse and worse just to find out if he'll love me enough to set those for me. Isn't that a shame?
Yeah. I remember a story, in fact, not too long ago I was reading about where it talked about setting boundaries in such a way that there was a mother that was out shopping with her daughter. Daughter was about 11 years old, and that's an age they can start to get real nasty, probably even a little earlier than that. And that's just how kids can be sometimes. Not all of them, but some of them, they can just be that way, like you said.
They're testing
boundaries, exactly. And so she says, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get you what you want when we go to the supermarket, but you got to at least keep your word that you're going to behave yourself. Okay. Now, here's what was interesting about that. So they're in the market, and this daughter just wanted to have what she wanted to have now and leave, right? So Mom goes about shopping, and the daughter's just hitting at her, and finally they get up to the counter, and Mom didn't say anything the whole time. Just put everything in the cart just like she was going to do. And there's the daughter throwing the fit right there at the counter. And she looks right at the clerk and she says, I'm really sorry, but my daughter had agreed to behave herself in this market. And I hate to put you folks out, but you're going to have to return all these groceries. We've got to leave and go home.
Yeah.
And the clerk stood there with a mouth dropped open, just like the daughter, like, what in the hell?
Yeah.
And sure enough, Mom walked out of the store and said, if you're coming along, you better get moving. And that was the end of it. She said, I never had a problem with the daughter after that when it came to shopping.
Exactly. One of the things that we teach in Love and Logic is that there are lots of situations that you find yourself in where you're just so surprised you don't know how to handle it. And you just do the best you can. And you say to yourself, well, this is a good reminder that I need to create a training session. And we call them strategic training sessions. So you get out your Love and Logic books or you listen to your CDs, and you come up with an idea that you think might work. You engineer a perfect scenario. And let's suppose it is at the store, the kid acting out in the store.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one lady who she got it all figured out with the help of her friends. And then the next step always is put that plan on the shelf and don't use it until you've gone around and said to your friends, I'm going to use this plan. What do you think might go wrong? And they'll all say, yeah, but what if he does this? Yeah, but what if he says that? And you have to say that, See, those are holes in the plan. You get all those plugged before you're ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that. And she called up her mother and said, tomorrow will be the last day that little Ryan, I think his name was Roger, little Roger, the last day he acts up and begs in the store. And I've got this plan. I've even involved the manager at the Target. I'm going to go down, I'm going to start shopping, and I'm going to put all the stuff he likes in that cart. And the minute he starts to beg and carry on, I'm just going to turn around and walk right out of there and leave the cart right in the middle of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a shock for him. She said, I even talked to the manager and told him not to worry. I'd come back and put the stuff back on the shelves. And she said, you know what he told me? He told me that if I'd let him watch, he'd put the stuff back on the shelves. Anyway, they went in there and did that. But prior to that, one of her friends said, well, what if he refuses to leave the store? See, that's the beauty of going around and asking what might go wrong. So they thought, well, he might throw himself on the floor and have a fit. What are we going to do? So they planned that all out. And Mom's friend was in the store that day, just kind of keeping an eye on things without the kid knowing it. And so she said, you be ready. If I walk out the door and he throws himself on the floor or refuses to leave, I'm just going to leave. And you can kind of pick him up and bring him home later, and you can charge him for the recovery mission here. And then Mom said, well, he doesn't have any money. Oh, he can pay with toys. Well, he doesn't have a toy he really likes. Well, let's buy him one the day before so that he's got something that's new that he really cherishes, and he can use that to pay me for the mission. Mm-hmm. Well, you can imagine what happened on that. Mm-hmm. Mom said, I giggled all the way home. I knew he was safe because my friend was watching him, and I was having a great time, and I figured this will be the last time he ever acts up. And she said, it was. See, if you do something right and plan it out, and you get your friends to help you, and you do it in a calm way, those kids will say to themselves, oh, my golly, if she was able to do that easy, I wonder what else she could do.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Now, what about passive-resistant teens? I mean, these can be sometimes your children, especially when it comes to homework. They know it's supposed to be due on Monday. Sunday night, they're trying to dump all the pressure on you. Why didn't you help me get it done? And an interesting scenario there, I remember, was not too long ago, there was a friend of mine whose son basically was staying over at the house, and what had happened is he waited and waited until the last minute. He was supposed to go to school on Monday. And she just simply said, well, here's how it's going to work. You need to get your homework done, and you need to get it done by Monday. And because he was across town, he'd have to actually take a couple of buses to be able to get to school. Uh-huh. And so the whole thing was, well, I'm going to go ahead and wait, and I'm going to do the homework, and I'm going to get it done. And then the next morning, she was waking him up, and, of course, he was running really late because he was blaming her, well, why didn't you wake me up? And all of a sudden, can I get a ride across town, from from your boyfriend? And she says, no, you're going to have to take the bus across the school, and I woke you up in plenty of time to do that. And really threw the whole responsibility onto the teen. For one, you didn't get the homework done, or you did, but you waited too late. Two, you expected somebody in the last minute to give you a nice, comfortable, cozy, warm ride all the way across town to go to school. And three, you're blaming someone for not waking you up on time, and the whole time is, yes, I did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a wise parent. I mean, probably didn't feel comfortable about that. Probably felt like, oh, boy, I'm a real jerk. Look what I've done to my kid. But my guess is remembering a whole lot better. I just got a story from one of my facilitators who said that talking about a little kid here who had, he's got some learning disabilities and so on. And so he tends to forget a lot. Well, a lot of times that forgetting is because the parents have never held him accountable for remembering. And so anyway, it was coming up Christmas time, and the two boys were told to make a list of the things they wanted, and they would see what they could do. And he just forgot to make his list. And the other boy got exactly what he wanted, and he got this backpack, and he looked at it and said, well, I didn't want a backpack. And they said, yeah, we thought you would. Since we didn't have a list, we just had to do the best we could. Well, can I take it back? Well, here's the receipt. Are you going to drive me over there? No, but if you find a way to get over there. He's over telling his brother, I got to figure this out. You know, those little times like that are the things that kids remember. And when they're 40 years old, they say to us, remember that time when you did that? You handed that problem right back to me.
It's funny because you take a look at, especially today, and a producer just emailed me in a question from one of our listeners here, and apparently the backdrop story of this goes that as her and her husband had split up, is that the kids were living with her for a while, and then it came to where the ex-husband now wanted to move out of state, and basically take the kids with him. And, well, anyway, so what had happened is the kids were down there living with Dad, who was very, apparently, as we were talking about earlier, the jellyfish, do whatever you want, I don't care. And actually, apparently has a girlfriend that really was kind of hard, but then she also liked to drink a lot, from what I understand. Well, anyway, so it happens that the daughter really yearns to come back and live with Mom, but Mom just didn't have things set up well enough, so she thought that the daughter could move back. So the daughter felt that Mom had abandoned her in such a way that she wasn't being rescued out of a situation that really her dad put her in the first place, it sounds like. So now she's using this as leverage, according to this story here, to basically punish her mom, probably to get her to cave in to get anything she wants. You know, oh, I hate you, and, you know, you were never there for me, and so forth. Even though the mother, in loving kindness, from what I understand, is really helping by giving her the things that she needs and wants, but there has to be a reciprocation about that. So basically, I guess the question comes down, according to what I've got here, is what do you do about a teen that wants to constantly punish you for something they feel you've done to them?
Well, you know, I'm thinking about the fastest way to turn around a teen like that is to make them part of the family again. Making them part of the family again means that they do their fair share of the work around the house. That means that we put a list on the refrigerator of all the jobs that it takes to get the house, to keep this house going. And that includes earning the money, you know, paying the bills, doing the shopping, driving the car, maintaining the car. You know, you take a couple weeks and you make that big old list. And then you say, right up till now, I've been a slave, and you've been living like an honored guest in the home, and that's really not fair to you. So pick some of the chores you like, and we expect you to get those done. Well, I don't want to do anything. None of my friends, I know, and what did I say, right? Yeah, well, this is stupid. I didn't come into this family to be a slave. I know, and what did I say? So you pick some, or I'll pick some for you. And then we use the two rules of getting chores done, and you can find these on our CD called "Didn't I Tell You to Take Out the Trash?" Right. Yeah, it's the first rule is you give the kids a deadline so far in the future that you have all the time you need to figure out what you're going to do if they don't do it. And so you never say do it and do it now. So, just have those done by, let's say, let's think up a good one. Before I take you to cheerleader practice, I have them done by then, okay? And then the second rule, never ever remind. Only tell them once and go to prayer Pray for them to forget so that you won't mess up this valuable learning opportunity, right?
That's the funny thing is parents really want them to do it, and they'll stay on them and stay on them. And the kids just sit there going, "Oh, I love it. I'm just upsetting the heck out of my mom and
dad." You've got it. So now we talk to our friends and say, what am I going to do if the chores don't get done? Because they won't get done with this girl, I'll tell you that. So let's go next door and get the neighbor kid and hire him at an exorbitant amount of money to do those chores and to show up right at time to go to the soccer game, you know. And it's time to go to the soccer game or cheerleading practice. I'm making this up as I go along.
That's okay.
Cheerleading practice, right? And did you do your chores? No, I'll get them later. Well, I'll drive later. But don't you worry. I don't want to hassle your head about this. I'll take care of it. Now, those are powerful words. I'll take care of it. I got Jeremy next door. He's going to do those jobs for you. And the kid will probably say, well, it's about time we got some help around here. And here she thinks she's getting by with it.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 hours later, and Mom still hasn't driven, she's actually called the coach ahead of time and said, he's probably not going to be there. Okay. Yeah, so you prepare for that. And when the jobs are done, she comes in and says, sweetie, Jeremy's in. He wants $85 for doing your jobs. Well, sweetie's going to throw a huge fit. I didn't ask for that. This is stupid. And what is the answer always? Love you too much to argue. Mm-hmm. I'll take care of it, not to worry. So then you let them think they got by with it a little bit longer. And then on Sunday you say, oh, by the way, before you go to school on Monday, let me know how you're paying me back for Jeremy. Well, I ain't going to do this. I don't know what's the matter with you. You know, you need help. You've got issues. Okay. And what's the answer? Love you too much to argue. I'll take care of it. She comes home from school on Monday, and she's looking around. She said, hey, where's my Xbox? And remember, the empathy always comes before the consequence. Mm-hmm. Oh, sweetie. Oh, boy. I had to take that thing down to the pawn shop to get the money to pay Jeremy. You know, they don't give you hardly anything down there, but I did manage to get the $85, and the good news is it's not gone. See, you got 60 days. You can get it back. Mm-hmm. Well, this is stupid. Well, tell the pawnbroker that's stupid. I mean, I'm out of this one, right?
I didn't come up with a price.
Yeah, okay. Now, we never want to do these things without, first of all, talking to our friends and saying what might go wrong. Mm-hmm. Because in this scenario, see, all the ones I talk about are real scenarios. The mother went around and said, what if I do this? And one of her friends said, what if she gets the idea she can take your stuff to the pawn shop? What are you going to do? And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Sweetie says, okay, for you, I'm getting your stuff. I'm taking it down to the pawn shop. And Mom had rehearsed this so many times she almost laughed while she said it. She said, oh, sweetie, you could do that. Nothing's stopping you. If you can find anything in my room that you paid for, like I paid for the Xbox, I think you're entitled. And if you find something that I paid for, it's called what? Stealing. Yeah, and guess who handles that kind of stuff? Now, there's a situation. And you walk out because the kid is going to be steaming mad. But is there going to be a different thought process next week when you say, I want the rugs vacuumed by Saturday at noon? Mm-hmm. And that is the fastest way to reel in a kid. So you've got that technique, and you also have the technique of, going on strike and negotiating for better working conditions. My son has a CD called Oh Great, What Do You Do Now? And it tells the story about a kid. He was disrespectful, and just like this one you're talking about, and Mom got a little help, and then she said to him, sweetie, I want you to know something. I'm happy to do the things you want when I feel respected and your chores are done. Now, you don't say when you respect me because the kid will argue and yell and say he's respecting you right now. This is when I feel respected and your chores are done. That's all she said. Well, it wasn't too long before he came down to get a Coke out of the refrigerator, and he reached in there, and the only thing that was cold was these cans of Slim Fast and celery and carrot. Hey, what's going on? How come there's no carrot? Cokes? Oh, glad to do that kind of stuff when I feel respected and the chores are done. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was mad. He went upstairs. His underwear is standing in the corner. Mom, when are you going to do some washing around this place? What's the answer? When I feel respected and your chores are done. Later on, he comes down. Hey, Mom, will you take me over to Mikey's? We're going to ride his motorcycle. What did she say? When I feel respected and the chores are done. Mm-hmm. Well, what's going to follow? Kid's going to go down to his room, and you're going to hear World War III going on. Does that mean you did the wrong thing, or that you're finally doing the right thing? Mm-hmm. And Mom said to her friends, I don't know when he's going to start doing his chores, but I'll tell you, my life is a whole lot better because the things that I used to do for him, I'm not doing. I'm not bailing him out of anything, and I've got a lot of time on my hands. Mm-hmm. And she said, I got a new thing going tonight. When he says, what's for dinner, I've got a can of Spam. He said, Spam will be a great behavior modifier. It meets all the requirements of Child Protective Services and social services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the funny thing, too. I know that even as I got into a step-family relationship, that even with my wife's two teens, she started applying the love and logic because she wanted them to come down and learn to cook. This was something, now honestly, I did with enthusiasm starting when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And
every kid should be doing that.
Exactly, and my mother finally, years later, says, well, I taught you guys to cook and to clean and to do the laundry and to iron your clothes because she says, I didn't want you to have to marry somebody to do those things for you. And here was my mother, flunked out, or I didn't flunk out, but she quit school in her sophomore year to have me, but she had just incredible common sense.
Yeah.
And I felt like we were in such a laid-back home, but we just knew and were expected to get things done around the house because she went to work. But kids this day and age don't seem to see it that way. They think they can just huddle up in a computer room and be on the internet all day or sit in front of the television and they'll get things done when they feel like it. And as a parent, you get to a point where you feel like, geez, how many more things should I be taking away before they're just sitting in a room isolated and still nothing is getting done? And what's interesting about the cooking scenario was that she would say, look, come on down, I want you to prepare a meal. Well, I'm too tired. Oh, that's okay. We can just have a nice breakfast in the morning. Yeah. These kids started starving, and they were looking for snacks. And I said, now that's the next thing I think we ought to eliminate is instant food. Make it to where they have to prepare it and make sure that it's fresh. God knows a kid doesn't want to go into the fridge when they're starving to find nothing but a stalk of celery, for instance.
Yeah.
Or something they actually have to wait until it's done cooking before they can eat it. They want the crackers, they want the chips, they want the soda. And so, you're kind of enabling them to get around, but what you do, I would think, is once you extinguish those immediate resources, leave them extinguished.
Very wise. That's good advice right there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Now, what about, we were sort of touching on it earlier, but passive resistance, that seems to be a big thing, as you were talking about earlier. When you start yelling at your children, they tend to shut down this day and age. As we've said earlier in the program, it's just no longer effective, and that's why love and logic is, because it puts the problem back on them. But you'll still have passive resistance. How is that dealt with?
The same way we were talking before, first of all, I think we need to get into another love and logic technique. And, we were all trained or conditioned to believe that when kids misbehave, we should do something immediately or we'll lose the teaching moment.
Right.
Well, love and logic teaches just the opposite. It says when kids misbehave, as long as it's not a safety issue, try to delay dealing with it long enough to get calm, and long enough to think it over, long enough to come up with a plan.
We count to 10.
And the magic words here are, wow, that's no good. I'm going to have to do something. And something, the word something is the magic word. I'm going to have to do something about that. And but not right now. I'll get back to you. Try not to worry about it. So later on, you thought to yourself, I can't think of anything to do about that. So you can always go to Love and Logic's technique called energy drain. If you have to worry about your kids, it drains your energy. If you have to think what to do about their behavior, it it drains your energy. If they lie, it drains your energy. See, you can always make it apply. So you can say, when you were screaming and carrying on in the car and all of that, that really drained my energy. I told you I was going to have to do something about that. I think you can put that energy back in me by, I was going to move that wood pile out there and back, but I think if you did that for me, that would probably restore my energy. Just have that done by Saturday noon, Mm-hmm. So pretty soon, the fact that you say, I'm going to have to do something, parents who use that actually find out that the word something is the most feared consequence in all of childkind. Because they're going to, do something. They want you to tell them what you're going to do. They want to be able to get into an argument about it right now. And if they don't know what it is, they're in bad trouble as far as they're concerned. Yeah.
That's kids today. They want it now.
Yeah. So with passive resistance, two things. One is go for the energy drain and always delay before you do it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is some kids are just oppositional, Mm-hmm. So, and it's kind of fun to have an oppositional kid. They're easier than other kids.
Ah.
And they're easier because they don't like to be told to do anything. Mm-hmm. So if I say to a kid, you go down to your room, they're going to slow down, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. If I say hurry up, you're going to have to compare them to a stationary object to see if they're moving. But if you said to them, I want you to go down into your room, but don't do it yet. I want you to walk down there as slow as you possibly can, and I want you to scream all the way down that this sucks and you shouldn't have to do it, and hit the wall a few times, and slam the door real good. And if you don't slam it good enough the first time, keep slamming it till you get it right. Now go. What's going to happen to that kid? Or like eyeball rolling, Mm-hmm. You can always say, well, I want to tell you something, but I think today I need you to roll your eyeballs when I do it. It's going to be so impossible. Or it's kind of fun when kids roll their eyeballs to just look at them and say, can you see your brains when you do that? and then forevermore, every time you tell them to do something, they start to roll their eyeballs. You can say, still looking for your brain? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's bound to be there somewhere. Keep looking, and you'll find it. Mm-hmm.
I remember
fun with that resistance.
Mm-hmm. I was remembering a time as you bring that up again back. It's kind of fun to talk about this because of being in a situation now with a couple of teen kids that are my wife's, and so the daughter was living in one situation. She wasn't too happy about it, so she just wanted to move out and move in with us, and it was interesting because I went through that with my own daughter. Mm-hmm. Where I don't like living with Mom, I want to live with Dad, and so we went over and, of course, we talked about it. So I'd been through this before, so here we're sitting down at the ice cream shop, and she's rattling off, why she just doesn't want to live there, and then, of course, Mom decides to do what parents sometimes tend to do, which is lecture. Mm-hmm. They talk about all these things, and then finally got to the point, and I could just see the daughter, her eyes just turned into a glaze, looking up to the right or to the left, like, okay, I'm sitting here, but I'm really not listening to anything until you tell me what I want to hear. So finally, my wife says, Dan, what do you think? And I said, well, it sounds to me like Barbara really wants to move out of the house. She's just not happy there, so I'll tell you what we can do. What we can do, Barbara, is we can go down to your high school tomorrow. We can go ahead and sign you out so you'll never have to go to school again. Then we're going to go down and we're going to get you your own apartment. We're going to go ahead and sign your name to the lease. And then we're going to also, after that, go get you a job so you can pay for that apartment, and then you can live any way you want to. And you'll never believe the kind of look that you've seen in this child's face while I was laying down what we could do about that. Yeah. And it was like all of a sudden you could just feel like the real world was seeping into her, like, how am I going to manage all that?
Yeah,
well,
I bet
that's
she
what
was
you
telling
want.
You how stupid you were.
And then there was another scenario. It's kind of fun, as you said, when you get kids that do things that after a while drain you, and she's also one who likes to, in the last minute, say, I'd like to do this. So there was a night she had a friend over. They wanted to go down to a little dance club downtown, basically at all ages, but mostly young ages type thing. And they dallied and dillied, and I said, I know what she's going to do. In the last minute, she's going to come down, and she's going to ask me to take her and her friend downtown to this nightclub in the last minute. Didn't say anything about it at all. Sure enough, just before they're ready to leave, her friend comes down and says, Barbara wants to know. And I said, well, why don't you go up and ask her to come down and ask me then? Oh, okay. So she comes down, and she's doing her little sweetie pie thing like little girls can do, Oh, would you please take us down to the nightclub? And I said, I expected you were going to come down here in the last minute and ask me that. So what are you willing to do if I do this? She says, well, I'll give you 50 cents. And I thought, oh, so she wants to be disrespectful and doesn't understand the nature of her situation. So I said, no, here's what we're going to do. You're going to pay me $20. Or you could pay a cab driver $35, or you could take the bus like you originally had planned to. Either way, you need to be back here by midnight. You should have seen her face when I said $20.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's funny because she still hasn't made good or even approached me to make good on that, because I know, according to what you were talking about, delayed consequences, she's going to come back to me again and want something. Now, you remember that matter about the $20? What are we going to do about that?
Yeah. The next one you pay in advance.
Exactly. Now, I had a question.
The whole idea is to try to treat them as much like the real world would treat them, so that when they get out there, it's not a mystery to them.
Right, exactly. Now, Jim, I had a question here from one of our listeners, and that is to simply ask whether or not are there facilitators of Love and Logic around the country, and how can they find out more about that?
They're all over everywhere.
They're all over everywhere.
Yeah, we've got them in other countries and so on. But every state has some, and calling our office, Love and Logic, 800-338-4065. And you get a huge surprise when you call there, right? What happens? Real people answer the telephone and talk to you.
No way, not today.
Yeah, exactly. We'll close that office before we ever go to an automated telephone system. I hate those things. So real people will answer the phone and not only direct you to where you can find somebody, but also could probably direct you to the right CD or DVD or something to solve the kind of problem they're dealing with at the time. But, they all are. Now, you're in Portland, is that right?
Right.
Oh, we have several great ones in Portland, yeah. All in Oregon's a hotbed for Love and Logic. And that whole West Coast there.
That's amazing. Again, Love and Logic, it's funny because it just elicits a lot of common sense, and it seems this day and age, common sense seems no longer common.
People are they recognize it when they see it, though.
Yeah, they certainly do.
Usually they say to themselves, that's what I've been thinking all along, I just didn't have the nerve to follow through that way. And so the best thing we do for people is to get them in contact with what they already know, but are kind of afraid to use.
Because heaven forbid should you be watching, one of those daytime talk television shows where, here's my teen beating up on me. Well, they're ready for the real world. Send them on their way.
Oh, yes, right.
Now, here, I've got another question from one of our guests here, and this is interesting because I do want to address this as we have on our program before. But the question is stated, how big of a problem do you think entitlement is nowadays for children?
Huge. We've created an entitled nation. It's not only a problem for kids; it's a problem nationwide. But when I do lectures for large groups of teachers, and usually there will be about 500 in there, so you'll get a great big response from that many people. I'll say, do you know anybody who's trying to engineer a perfect world for their kids? And they all scream, oh, yeah. Is this a major problem to the schools? Oh, yeah. Are these kids willing to work for anything at school? No. Do the schools get blamed then if the kids are lazy? Oh, yeah. Well, will these parents lie for their kids? Oh, yeah. Will they give them anything they want? Oh, will they do their schoolwork for them? Oh, yeah. They know. And then I say, and now we get dead silence, because I say, tell me something. We all have seen this happening. Raise your hand if you ever see it work out well in the long run. Dead silence and no hands go up. So we wrote a book on that called From Innocence to Entitlement. And for us to put out a book, it's usually a $30,000 investment, and that's before we sell one, and it's usually a couple of years of work. So we wouldn't do that if it wasn't a major problem. But the little girl that kind of triggered it came into therapy, and the therapist said, well, what brings you to counseling? Oh, it's my parents. They're clueless. They don't know, And she's just going on about how bad her parents are. And my dad is the most clueless of all. He bought me this heap to drive to school, and he should know that a girl who's really with it doesn't drive a car with 4 doors on it. You couldn't believe. He knew I was supposed to have a convertible. I don't know where that comes from, but he knew I was supposed to get a convertible. She refuses to drive the brand new Honda Civic that he's given her. And what did he do? He sold the Honda Civic and bought the convertible. And I bet you and all your listeners can tell me exactly what happened to that convertible.
Yeah, well, it didn't turn out well because I have a brother whose wife did the very same thing for her daughters. So
it got trashed. And so, but it wasn't her fault because if he'd bought the one with traction control and that kind of stuff, so that wasn't her fault either. And he said, or the therapist said, your dad called and said he didn't know how many sessions he could afford because he's just about broke trying to provide all this stuff you think you should have. Don't you feel a little guilty about the position you put your parents in? She said, of course not. It's a parent's job to get good stuff for their kids. And there you've got it right there. This is not the only kid thinking that way. But here's the bottom line. Here's the really tragic part of entitlement. Once somebody gains that belief that they're entitled to the good life and the good things because of who they are and not what they earn, they can never, ever be happy again the rest of their life. It's a prescription for a lifetime of unhappiness because everything that happens to them will never, ever be their fault. And they will not be able to create that happy life. They'll still be waiting at 80 years of age for somebody to create that happy life. And that's how we steal from our kids, by getting that started early in life. So kids need to make lots of decisions when they're young. They need to make a lot of mistakes, live with the consequences. We need to be really loving while we hold them accountable. They need to start earning things. And early in life, when they want us to drive them to their soccer games and all that kind of stuff on Saturday, we need to explain to them that that takes time out of our day, and they need to figure out something they can do for us to make that time available. They need to have a set of chores around the house and be held accountable to do them without being paid for them. And they need, they need to be responsible for preparing at least one family meal per week, cooking it, serving, cleaning it up. And when they want something, we don't tell them that they shouldn't have it. We say, wouldn't it be wonderful? I want those $200 sneakers. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You ought to have those. And we might go for matching funds. I've got $25 for some shoes. If you can earn the rest, you're in them. I can't wait to see you walking in those things. So they start earning things early in life, and then they're not going to need a bailout from the government later on.
Yeah, isn't that funny how we're hearing about that in this recession, i.e. depression? What's the government going to do? And it's like, well, what did you do for yourself so when something like this happens, you don't have to worry about it?
Exactly.
Now, I got another question here as we're getting to the end of our show that I think is really interesting here, and that was, what was your motivation or vision for starting Love and Logic? Well, guess I should have asked that earlier in the program.
That's a long story about how I wasn't very successful or very happy with the way I was raising my kids, nor the way I was working with the kids at school. And way back in the late 60s, I actually, in frustration, slapped a 5th grader, and he turned out to be a bleeder.
Oh, no.
Bled all over the school. A horrible situation. And I thought, this is so painful, I've got to find some other ways to deal with kids. So it really sent me out on a mission to find out different ways of working with kids. And So there wasn't much available, but there were different kind of psychologists that I made friends with who would tell me some theoretical things, and I had the ability to kind of turn those into practical application. Then along the way, I started discovering that you could have two different parents discipline two different kids in exactly the same way and get different results. And when we went out to try to study why that was, we found out that the parents who got good results were those who always had an empathetic sound prior to telling the kid the consequence.
Uh-huh.
You know, oh, geez, I ran out of money. Oh, I hate that. And I'll be giving you some allowance on Saturday. I can't wait till then. What's the answer? Love you too much to argue. And I bet all the way through this interview you're starting to see that you can be a great parent with a very limited vocabulary, right?
Yeah, I think we could use all of them.
I'm going to do something about that. Try not to worry about it. What did I say? You know, how sad. Those kind of things cause kids to think.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim Fay, it's been a real pleasure to have you take the time to be on our program today. And, of course, we love you too much to argue as well. But would you mind giving out your website for people to find out more about Love and Logic?
You know, another thing, while I do that, website is real simple, loveandlogic.com. And that and is spelled out. And there's all kinds of free services on there. And one of the free services they want to take advantage of is the free weekly email tip that we write. Comes out every week on Wednesday. And, of course, we don't sell anybody's webs or their email addresses, so it's secure with us. Mm-hmm. But every Wednesday, you're going to get a practical tip that you can use right away that very same day, and it's something you can read in about 1 minute. So loveandlogic.com, or if you want to get a surprise, call 800-338-4065 and a real person will visit with you.
Very good. Well, Jim Fay, thank you again for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
What a delightful interview. Thank you.
You betcha. We want to also thank you, the guests out there, and we've got a lot of them, for asking the wonderful questions and the comments that you've been sharing with us. Again, parenting, it's going to have its challenges, but it should be fun and nurturing all at the same time. We also encourage you listeners to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, as well as visit us at our blog where we archive all of our shows and great resource information for you to use, as well as pass on to family and friends as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.